What's the saddest story you've ever heard?
I was living in a third world country years ago. There was this guy about my age who was blind. I was 19 at that time. He sometimes wandered the streets of my neighborhood selling brooms, which he carried in a bundle in his back. He didn't have a dog or anything, just a staff. I saw him walk by the house where we lived a few times and I felt kind of sorry for him, but the first few times didn't really think much of it. What struck me about him, I suppose, was that he was my age. Normally, poor people on the streets are very old or very young, or maybe women with children. Here was a dude that looked otherwise healthy yet was obviously quite destitute, but tried to make a living despite his disability, and believe me, it's quite different to live with a disability in a country like that than it is in France or the US. A few months after I had last seen him, I came home and my mom was having a reunion with some of her lady expat friends as she did once a week. Tea and so on. I stopped by the solarium where they were, said hello to all, and proceeded to grab me a soda and a few pastries. While I was doing this, I picked up on the conversation they were having. It turns out that the day before, there had been a murder in a poor neighborhood that bordered ours. Not an unusual occurrence, but what stopped me was one of the ladies saying that they had unalived a blind couple. I inquired further, and it turns out that it was this guy. The ladies knew him, of course, because they lived in the same area and I suppose even bought a broom or two from him at some point. Then it got worse. He lived in a little house with his wife, who was also blind. Apparently she worked doing needlepoint or something like that. A number of men had broken into their house at night, the guy, and while he was lying on the floor, his wife repeatedly. Then they stabbed her and kicked the guy's head in against the concrete floor of the house as they were leaving, unaliving him. She was still alive when they found her the next morning, but she died later. These were two disabled kids who had rallied against poverty and discrimination and tried to make it in the world on their own. They didn't deserve it. I think this has stuck with me over the years as something very sad because I always remembered seeing the guy walking slowly with his staff clicking on the pavement, yelling out brooms, brooms, and I wanted to come over and talk to him, ask him what his name was, if he had been born that way, and maybe help. Hell, maybe even buy a broom I didn't need, but I never did it. I could never shake the feeling that maybe I could have done something for him and his wife if I had known she existed, that maybe I could have prevented that from happening to them. His name was Inesio, and his wife's name was Zoila. I never saw or met Zoila, but I think I'll remember her and his husband until the day I die.